Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So we are in the middle of a series. I was going to say a short series, but it's not really short because there's 16 different personality types, Antonia. So I consider 16, that's 4 months, right?
17 with the intro one.
That's right. So 17 episodes.
That's like a month's worth of podcast.
Yeah, it's like 4 months.
Super long series.
Of content. And so we're in the middle of this series, working through every single one of the Myers-Briggs types. This week, we're landing on ENFJ. And we're going to talk about on this episode how an ENFJ can show themselves love, how they can use an understanding of their personality type to express love to themselves. This is something I think a lot of people struggle with, not just ENFJs. We've talked about it on this series so far. A lot of people right now in the world are like, how do I express love to who I am? How do I love myself? And a lot of people struggle with knowing how to do this. And our theory is that having an understanding of personality type and the framework of your personality, it gives you this 1 degree of separation from your sense of self. So it like allows you to look at yourself in a lens or through a model or a framework of your personality type. And it gives you an ability to see it outside of yourself. And I think it gives us access points for love.
Yeah. Well, Isabel Briggs Myers calls it type patriotism.
There you go.
Which is a phrase that basically means that we think our type is the coolest. Not necessarily technically, we understand the value of other personality types, but there's something to be said for like going like, yeah, I mean, if I had to choose a type, this is the type I would choose. It's probably because it's the devil we know.
Yeah.
And the reason why we feel like understanding one's personality type and building appreciation through it and fostering a relationship with ourselves using type as a lens is there seems to be like a weird, well, I don't know if it's weird. We get a lot of messages from society that we're not supposed to show ourselves shameless love.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's conceited or something. And yet we are always trying to send ourselves love all the time because we do love ourselves. This is a theme that we've mentioned in every one of these podcasts in the series.
Yeah.
And I'll say it in every single one from here, from this point forward. We are always trying to send ourselves love. So this is not about using type in order to start sending love to ourselves. It's using type to be able to receive love from ourselves because we're always trying to communicate that love. And yet there's all these obstructions between us sending love to ourselves and being able to receive love from ourselves.
Yeah.
Those obstructions are narratives, beliefs, a bunch of self-impressions we have, like I'm not good enough, poor self-talk. And if we can start to remove those obstructions, then now we can get the love we're already sending to ourselves, we can then receive because we don't have anything in the way. We don't have any of these, I don't know, like I think there are attempts to keep ourselves modest, but they end up just being demoralizing. So when we remove those obstructions, then we can receive that love. And while there's lots of different ways to do that, we feel like type is a really great map or a model that we can very quickly diagnose maybe some of our self-talk or some of the challenges that we experience with all of this and then go, okay, so if you do this thing, you're probably going to remove an obstruction so that you can start receiving love that you're already giving to yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things, housekeeping things. A, you listening right now, if your ENFJ preferences, you understand relationships, right? This is something that you show up to the world kind of getting. You have a lot of talent for it. Now you can build skill, and most ENFJs do over time. And we're going to talk a little bit about these in specificity. But it's really nice that you're so tuned to relationship because we can use this as a framework for you today. That just in the same way that you get into a relationship with somebody else and show them love, we can use that as a tool for your relationship with yourself. So the first thing I want to say, go back to the point about love being free. We give love without condition, unconditional love. And if you're in a partnership or relationship and you're an ENFJ, you know this, that you would want your partner and show your partner in a romantic relationship or a friend or family or anybody love without any conditions to it, unconditional love in that relationship. Now, we know that's not the full picture of relationships though. And you as an ENFJ, if you're listening, know that too. You know that it's not enough for someone to just send love. There are expectations in a relationship dynamic that we have. So while love is freely given, unconditional, there are conditions on the relationship itself. There are conditions on the channels that love is sent back and forth with, right? If you treat me mean, Antonia, in our relationship, at some point I'm going to have to put boundaries up and say, okay, it's not okay for you to treat me that way, or talk to me that way, or vice versa, right? If I was doing the same thing to you, we have like expectations. They're unspoken and spoken, expectations of each other that we have in relationships. Same thing happens for the self. We can give love to ourselves freely. It should not be conditional. We shouldn't, and this is for you, this is the second thing I want to say for you as an ENFJ. We're going to talk about why this is the case. You have this little mean critical voice inside your head that sneaks up sometimes. For some ENFJs, often. For others, it's relentless. And it's chattering away at all the things you're doing wrong, all the criticisms that you could hear from yourself. And it's just picking and prodding. It's this inner mean voice that's cutting you down and telling you you're doing it wrong and you don't have the right information. You don't have the right way to do this. Critical. It's actually trying to help you. But it's a part of you. And a lot of ENFJs express, this is hard for me to have love for myself when this part of me is so loud. And so we want to talk about that today. We're going to go through a whole methodology with you and go through this in a proper way. But I just want to bring that to the surface and say that thing that you're talking about, if you identify with that as ENFJ, we're going to address that because it's actually better than you think. That's not just a place that you need to know how to manage for self-love. It's actually, this is a part of you that's trying to send you love. Honestly, It is. And just putting in its proper relational context, this part of you that shows up with that criticism, that could really open up the door for you to feel a lot better, to move through the world, to contribute more, to have the harmony that you crave in your life and the self-love that you crave. Because I think a lot of ENFJs in particular can love everybody else. And when it comes to them, they're like, this is hard. It's really hard to receive love from myself. So today we're going to use the CAR model. It's just a framework that we pulled out of our ENFJ owner's manual. So we created this owner's manual that goes through its 5 modules right now at the time of this recording. It goes through how to be in flow, how to work on your loops and grips and get your stucking points, get unstuck, growth strategies, a bunch of stuff in there. We just plucked out the CAR model of your personality. ENFJ, those 4 letters, it's just a code to talk about how your mind is wired. I'm going to grossly oversimplify this just to give a cursory, point on the map that we can follow along. If you're looking at your ENFJ personality type, ENFJ, we can see your mental wiring. Just imagine your mind is a 4-passenger car. You have a driver. Next to the driver is a co-pilot. These 2 parts of you are driving your life. Sitting behind them are 2, we call them children. They have the sophistication level or the certainty level of children sitting behind them. So behind your co-pilot on the right side of the car is sitting a 10-year-old child about that level. And right behind the driver sitting a 3-year-old. I'm going to, again, grossly oversimplify this for you just to catch us all up so we're all on the same page. You want to go further, go get an owner's manual for ENFJ. Takes you way down the rabbit hole of this. Personalitygrad.com. It's a great resource. So your driver for ENFJs is technically called extroverted feeling. It's a cognitive process that makes decisions. We've nicknamed it harmony. It's about getting needs met. It's about knowing the social dynamic, hierarchy, tuned into the vibe of a situation. It really understands, and how things should be operating in the external world among people and feelings and relational things. Co-pilot, ENFJ's co-pilot, we've nicknamed it perspectives. It's a mental process that shifts perspectives and sees things from different angles. It actually gets into somebody else's shoes and say, oh, well, they're probably seeing it from this angle. It can run projections in the future. Again, I'm oversimplifying. It does way more than what I'm saying. And it takes on different perspectives. And this is some of the best thinking and planning and abstraction and imagination you can bring to the table as an ENFJ. It really helps you understand the bigger picture that's going on with people, situations, and the world.
Yeah, its technical name is introverted intuition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trying to go fast, so sometimes I list these details. Sitting right behind that co-pilot is a process we've nicknamed sensation. Technical name is extroverted sensing. It has about the certainty level of a 10-year-old child. And sometimes it's posturing and trying to prove itself. And sometimes it's shrinking back, uncertain of what it's doing. And it has uncertainty, but it has some skill, has some proficiency. This is a part of you that can be playful, fun. It's tuned into the moment. Unlike perspective, which is taking longer timelines in people's perspective. This is about what's happening right now. Where's the fun? Where's the energy? Where's the excitement? What's the direct path of action? That's this part of you that shows up. Sometimes it can hijack you as an ENFJ. And then right behind the driver sits what we call the 3-year-old. It has the certainty level of a 3-year-old. Its technical name is introverted thinking. We've nicknamed it accuracy. This is that little critical voice I was talking about at the very beginning earlier. This is the part that just chatters in your ear. If it's done well, it is tuned to things like logic, logical consistencies, core beliefs and truths about what I actually believe, what is the real basis of my beliefs and what I operate from. But at a 3-year-old child's sophistication, well, not necessarily sophistication, but certainty, sometimes instead of being a calibrator voice this can show up for you as an ENFJ specifically as a critical voice. It can be deeply painful. And this can be a block to showing self-love because all you can hear from this voice oftentimes, if your ENFJ preferences, is that just constant stream of criticism. So this is the framework we're going to walk through, and we're going to talk about the expectations of different parts of yourself, just like if we're going to talk about a relationship between two people. If you're in a partnership, you have expectations of another person. Well, you're in partnership with yourself. So what is the proper, and Antonia, I'm teeing you up here, ... What's the proper expectation that we should have, or an ENFJ should have, based on their cognitive wiring from their preferences?
Yeah. So to reiterate the point you've been making, love isn't earned, and that includes self-love.
Yeah.
So what we're about to launch into isn't a formula for earning love from yourself. But just as you mentioned, a good relationship is earned because hard work goes into a good relationship.
Yeah.
So loving yourself should be happening and is happening all the time without, like you said, it's unconditional. But a good relationship with self, which is the ability to receive that love you're giving, that is something that can be like earned through work, right? That healthy relationship to self.
Yeah.
And as you've mentioned multiple times, which is great, a good relationship is earned by setting reasonable expectations. And reasonable expectations aren't low expectations. They actually are a combination of high and low expectations. They're not low, but like grounded.
They're properly calibrated.
Properly calibrated
Can we say that?
expectations. That's right. So when you're in a relationship with somebody and you know that they have a talent in something and you see them squander that talent, you get disappointed, right?
Yeah.
You want to see them at their best. And so a reasonable expectation for somebody you're in relationship with is that if they can capitalize on their talents by building more skill, you're going to be sending them more signals. You're going to be telegraphing appreciation and love more. You're going to strengthen the bond of the relationship because you know that they're doing the best that they can for themselves and the people in their lives.
Yeah.
Whereas if you know a person has weaknesses, you're not going to berate them for those weaknesses. You need to set calibrated expectations when a person is struggling with something or it's hard for them to do. Otherwise, you're just demoralizing and beating them over the head for something that they really are never going to master.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with ourselves. So the 4 different positions in the car model that you mentioned are descending orders of expectations.
Yeah.
When we talk about the driver function, we need to have very high expectations for ourselves there because we have a lot of natural talent. And that natural talent needs skill developed on top of it in order to bring out our best. So when you talk about that harmony element, then for people with ENFJ preferences, with extroverted feeling, they need to have high expectations for that part of who they are.
Yeah.
The co-pilot's the same. We need to have high expectations for ourselves in that part of who we are. When you get to the 10-year-old function, we need to be setting more reasonable expectations. We need to not make it so that we're going as hard on ourselves there. And by the time you get to the 3-year-old in the car model, the expectations need to be quite reasonable. And we need to not beat ourselves over the head if we're not excelling at those parts of who we are.
Yeah. So one of the challenges we have at this podcast is we try to record podcasts that anybody can listen to, no matter where you are in your type journey, whether you're brand new or whether you're way down the rabbit hole and you know a lot. So if you're new and you're like, wait a minute, you're talking about cognitive functions and these 4 positions, I'm a little lost. I thought the 4 positions, quote unquote, were these letters, ENFJ. What is all this other stuff you're talking about? If that's you, just know that there's basically 2 general parts of you. There's part of you that is kind of living in the front seat of your life. And this is the part of you can have proper and higher expectations of. But then the other part of you is a little bit in the backseat of your life where it's going to be some of the more challenging parts of you, more uncertain parts of you. And you can have low expectations for those 2 parts. So 2 of the parts of you, you're going to have high expectations for, 2, you're going to have lower. Now, if you're down the rabbit hole and you're really up onto speed and all these things, you know, understand cognitive function, all that, we're going to go into fidelity of the 4 positions. But just know there's kind of a bifurcation here. There's front seats and back seats of your car, of your life. And you want to live from the front seat of your car and you want to have high expectations for those parts of you. And you have to accommodate and mitigate some of the energies of the other parts of you that can cause you challenge down the road.
Well, but at the same time, integrate them because they're still important parts of who you are.
Absolutely.
Just like kids or children are important parts of a family.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about how to properly set expectations in all 4 of these positions, and ways that we can show up to the world and watch ourselves do the best job that we can, right?
Yep.
Be the most us that we can be in a single lifetime.
So you already mentioned that harmony driver process.
Mhm.
Let's jump into that even more. So this is the part of you as an ENFJ, or if you have an ENFJ in your life, there's a lot of capacity here. This is part of you have natural talent for. And if you build skill, I mean, this is basically like the water you swim in. This, as an ENFJ, this is the gift you bring to the world.
Yeah. All ENFJs have talent here.
Yeah.
Not all ENFJs have built skill here. And this is the, in our friend Dr. John Beebe's model, this is part of what he calls the axis of relating to self. So while it is a relationship building function, relationships being that the function itself of extroverted feeling or harmony, it's focused on the energy between people. You could call it rapport, right? What are the energetic signals that people are sending to each other back and forth? And that is the basis for what you could call interpersonal intelligence, right? The energy that people, all that communication that people are doing, the subterranean communication, the energies we're bringing, how people are relating to each other, interpersonal dynamics.
It's the vibe.
Right.
It's the vibe between folks, right?
And it goes all the way from 2 people who are vibing at a party and talking up to entire cultures and civilizations are all built on interpersonal dynamics. So this is a function that understands that's its field, right? That is its field of interest and its field of talent. When somebody with ENFJ preferences relies primarily on talent, they get really good at making people like them, getting into rapport with people, building friendships, casual acquaintances. They usually have a lot of those. They're the kind of people who oftentimes report that others will open up to them, people that they don't know very well, because they just have this, it's almost like a safe energy around interpersonal dynamics. They like being in a vibe with people. They like being in rapport. So they tend to open themselves up to it. And so this is a function that somebody with ENFJ preferences needs to have higher expectations for themselves than merely talent. They need to develop skill on top of it. And one of the reasons why somebody with ENFJ preferences might not build skill is that the world around them is happy with the talent that they bring, right? The ability to create rapport. They won't get a lot of feedback from other people that they need to do better because they're usually doing pretty good, right? Just on talent alone. And if we're talented at something, we usually have built some skill around it, right? It's interesting to us. Topics that are related to it are usually topics that we seek. So it's very rare when somebody with ENFJ preferences has like no skill developed. But in order for somebody with ENFJ preferences to not have this be an obstruction to experiencing love from themselves, they need to be building a level of skill where their inner wisdom, the inner self, knows that they're doing the best job that they can, meaning that they're not leaving money on the table, that they're not just allowing rapport building to be enough, that they're not just allowing their ability to get people to like them or to have these casual relationships or casual acquaintances, or even the ability to kind of take care of people around them be enough.
The reason why is it erodes self-trust. It erodes a sense of self. If you have an inkling or a talent for capacity that you're not building skill toward, you're going to always go, man, I could do better. Like it might even be unconscious. And then the other parts of you, we'll talk about that accuracy part of you is going to come in. You could do better. It's going to tell you too. Other parts are going to tell you this. Plus the extroverted feeling harmony part is going to be like, yeah, we could do better. We could stretch ourselves here. And so a proper relation, what I hear you saying then, a proper relationship for an ENFJ to have with themselves is to say, I need to be doing all I can from this place.
Yes.
I have tons of certainty here. I have tons of capacity. I can build tons of skill. If I don't, I bet I'm eroding my abilities for self-love.
Exactly. And especially since this is part of the relationship to self.
Yeah.
Even though it understands interpersonal relationships with others, it's still a lot of your self-esteem comes from how well you're doing this function. So some ways that it shows up when a person relies mostly on talent and not as much skill development is it's a lot of superficial connections. It's an over-reliance on social validation. So the approval and disapproval of other people, which can create a bit of a fragile self-esteem, right? kind of a brittle self-esteem, honestly.
Well, it screws up your boundaries because you don't have strong boundaries if you're looking for approval.
That's exactly it. It also it usually shows up as struggling with boundaries between people, right? And having personal boundaries, because if you're really in tune with the energy between two people, if you are picking up energies from others, one of the things that extroverted feeling or harmony really hones in on is this person okay? Because if they're pumping out not good energy, well, then that person needs to be caretaken, right? Like something needs to be done. There's a need going unmet. How do we meet that need? And especially since they're going to be pinging off of other people. And if emotions are contagious, which is something that extroverted feeling or harmony very much understands, is that an emotion can be contagious, right? Somebody walks into a room full of people having a great time and they bring this like Eeyore-like energy. Well, they might throw a wet blanket over everything. So this function gets really good at understanding when a need is going unmet, and then usually takes it upon themselves to try to meet it if at all possible, to make sure everybody's good if we're all going to be in a vibe. If it's a talent, not a skill, and one feels compelled to help meet those needs, though, it can become difficult to not just find yourself over-serving, right? Kind of over-giving in an emotional realm. And then going, well, I'm doing all this work. Why aren't people seeing it? Because a lot of the times the work that's being done, people only notice when it stops, right? Yeah. Because it's not a lot of like you can point to the outcome. The outcome is an improved mood, or the outcome is a better experience for everyone, but they might not know that you did that work. So when you only rely on talent but don't build a lot of skill, or don't build as much skill as is possible when it's a driver or what's technically called a dominant function, then you can get into a place where you feel that everybody's taking. So you create these one-sided relationships and you're not receiving as much. It also shows up as conflict avoidance, right? And it can also show up as a bit of an assumption that you know what's right for the greater good, even if others can't see it. So you might justify doing things like maybe even overreaching in order to do things for the greater good.
So high capacity, tons of expectation for an ENFJ here. What is it? So an ENFJ is watching or listening right now, what could they expect of themselves then?
So when the function is well developed and skill is developed, a lot of times it looks like setting healthy boundaries, right? Understanding that sometimes a need has to go unmet for a time, right? Sometimes it's okay if somebody experiences that. They're learning that they need to meet their own needs, right? And so it can be a greater distinction between a need going unmet and whether or not you yourself as the person with ENFJ preferences is the person that must meet that need. Like there are times when it's okay that not everything feels good. It's okay when there's a disruption in the force, so to speak. It's an ability to understand the importance of conflict, not conflict avoidance, but actually, turning the earth over and being willing to see it directly, see that conflict directly in order to create true harmony. It's understanding the higher ethic of what it really means to be harmonious. Does it mean that everybody likes everybody else? Does it mean that everybody's getting along all the time? Or does it mean that there's a whole symphony of people, and sometimes in that symphony, people are playing discordant notes, and that's okay because it doesn't necessarily throw the song off. Sometimes it actually creates a more interesting, music if things are a little discordant. So it's almost seeing yourself as an orchestra conductor and understanding that there are different things going on at different times, and that's okay, right? We don't all have to be on the same page all the time. And I, as the ENFJ, which I don't have ENFJ preferences, but let's pretend for the sake of the sentence I do, I, as the ENFJ, do not have to always be the person making it all okay. I can create some good boundaries for myself, and I can include in my understanding of relationship to self. I can put myself in that equation. I don't have to just be on the receiving end of approval and disapproval. I can also be the person who is approving and disapproving other people, right? I'm a part of that equation. And an elevated level of this function means understanding some of these nuances, understanding that sometimes things just have to roll out the way they roll out.
I think a lot of times INFJs and ENFJ, well, anybody that has harmony, when they talk about boundaries and borders, boundaries, basically creating boundaries, it's all about the energy being held out. I mean, that's how it's usually talked about, but I don't want us to lose sight of, and a lot of NFJs or harmony people know this as well, that it also is a distinction maker of where I am and where I stop and where somebody else begins. So it's not just about the permeability, that'd be the right word, right? The ability to pass back and forth the energy and the boundary of like, you can't let that energy in because it's toxic or whatever. It's about stopping energy, but it's also knowing where I end and where I start and stop.
Right.
And I think the thing about this is it gives you a sense of self. I think that's the point I'm trying to make is boundaries. A lot of ENFJs will say, I don't know what I want. I don't know what's important to me. I don't know where I start and stop. And with this function and the expectation of this harmony process for you as an ENFJ, not only will you be able to have a better handle, I wouldn't say control, but a better mechanism for allowing or disallowing certain energies to come into your life.
Yes.
Better boundaries there in relationships, but it also gives you a sense of, okay, this is me. This is the boundary of my sovereign territory of who I am as a person. And I think that gives you access to self-love. It's almost like you're creating a protection around yourself. Like, this is my space. This is my inner world. This is my terrain. Don't step on it. This is me. I'm showing myself love by creating boundaries for myself. And I know where I am in those boundaries. And I think that's a part that maybe gets missed in all of that because it seems so defensive and protective, which it can be. But I think it's very positive in that it leads you to a sense of who you are through those boundaries.
Right. And they don't have to be hard.
That's right.
They don't, like you said, they don't have to be defensive when this
I mean, negotiable, like over time.
Exactly. There's a negotiation at all times. And there's a sense of no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
Like if a person overextends and hits a boundary and you didn't communicate it, well, there's a sense of like, well, I guess I should have communicated my boundary, or this didn't come up before. So now I'm going to communicate it.
Yeah.
And if the person respects it, then I don't have to be upset with them. I just go, okay, well, this is a boundary of mine. But there's not going to be a lot of, I want to say, synthetic boundaries, right? There's also going to be an understanding of the importance of giving.
Yeah.
So there won't be like like right now I see a lot of really harsh boundaries put up in the world around like, well, I don't owe you anything, right? There's like this sense of like, if somebody talks to you, well, I don't owe you conversation. Well, really well done extroverted feeling or harmony knows that that we are civil because it's not because it's owed, but because it creates a better world, right? Like there's a, like, well, so you talked to me and I didn't want you talking to me. You're creepy, so get away from me. It's kind of like, well, no, extroverted feeling or harmony goes, just because we're talking to each other doesn't mean you're crossing a boundary. Just because a person, and like if I don't have the time for it right now, or I'm just having a moment to myself and with my headphones or whatever, I can communicate that, right? And I can go, actually, I'm kind of having a me day right now. So thank you so much for the conversation, but I think I'm going to kind of go back into my own little space here because I think I need to be in relationship to myself right now or whatever, like letting the other person down in the nicest way possible.
Yeah.
It's not an aggressive stance, but at the same time, it's not allowing people to take too much. It's not allowing other people to cross boundaries and then later on get upset that they crossed a boundary or get upset with yourself that you allowed other people to cross a boundary. It's it's just kind of an understanding that this is all very complicated, right? Interpersonal dynamics are very complicated, which is why it's considered its own form of intelligence in Gardner's multiple intelligence model. Like there's a lot going on here. And when it's elevated, there's a sense like this is my domain and I don't have to get upset around any of this. I can just kind of negotiate and navigate through all of this. I can help other people negotiate and navigate their relationships. And I can create a true sense like of harmony, like a real sense of harmony that we're all sort of in this dance. And it's not very choreographed, right? And we can just sort of energetically dance with each other. And sometimes I dance closer, and sometimes I dance further away, and I do so with a heightened sense of diplomacy.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of diplomacy that comes in when this is a well-developed function, and there's also a high amount of ability to persuade other people to do what's in their best interest, to persuade people to have good relationships with each other. And through all of that, a lot of leadership can come up as well. Like particularly anything that has to do with teamwork. There's the highest form or some of the highest forms of developing this function is using it in leadership. and really compelling people to take actions that are in everybody's best interest while maintaining this sense of equilibrium.
Yeah.
And so when somebody with ENFJ preferences doesn't develop this function to a higher order, doesn't do as much as they can with all of this natural talent for interpersonal dynamics, they can feel it. It's like they can feel they're leaving money on the table. Like in a relationship with somebody else, you see them have all this talent and they just waste it.
Yeah.
You're kind of disappointed for them. And when somebody with ENFJ preferences does the same, they waste this extraordinary talent of interpersonal dynamics, the self kind of feels a little disappointed, right? And goes, no, I think we could be doing better. And that is sometimes an obstruction to receiving the love we're trying to send to ourselves, is that we're wasting something that helps us understand the best of ourselves.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the part of the ENFJ. Sometimes ENFJs can just bypass this. I mean, it's a part of them. They know it's there. But sometimes they can feel so extroverted, they miss this more introverted part of them that's their co-pilot. Introverted intuition is the technical name. We call it perspectives. And this is a real superpower for you as an ENFJ. Now, this is the part of you, if you have ENFJ preferences, this is the part of you that moves through the world and is a little bit assaulted by the world. Not like physically assaulted, but like you're picking up the psychic energy and feelings and emotions and energetic like discord of the entire planet or the space that you're in. Often you can be reading this and not know exactly where these emotions, these thoughts, these feelings, all this is coming at you. It almost feels like it's happening to you. So this really makes it easy for an ENFJ to go, I don't want to feel that. I'd rather just stay kind of in this, outwardly focused place, moving fast. Slowing down and getting into this part of me only brings pain, and it brings a bunch of other people's psychic garbage. I need to get away from this is somewhat the instinct. Now, again, a mature ENFJ that's grown themselves, that's focused on things, and over time it happens naturally too, will actually love this part of themselves and weave it more into their existence because it's a beautiful part of the ENFJ personality. It's part of you that really understands longer timelines, bigger implications, not just what's going on in the dynamic between, people right now, but like a deeper truth of that dynamic in that relationship on a long enough timeline and what the core things are that those people think or feel or see, not just what's happening right now and the feelings of the moment. So this is a really beautiful, powerful part. And I think we can still have high expectations for an ENFJ with this part of themselves, but that's not always obvious to an ENFJ.
Yeah, it's like an antenna of intuition.
Yeah,
that picks a bunch of stuff up. And as you mentioned, the technical name is introverted intuition. So it's an understanding of, it's an intuitive understanding that requires quiet to truly access. It requires a separation from the outside world. And it allows anybody who has this function, it allows them to create a picture inside their head, almost like a replication of reality outside of themselves, and to create like basically entire worlds inside their mind if they want to. It sees into the future if that's its direction. It can run simulations of where things are headed. And when it's a co-pilot for people with ENFJ preferences, it's usually attuned because they have such a adeptness with people and interpersonal relationships. It's usually attuned to relationships and to culture. Like, what's the bigger picture of culture? What's the bigger picture of the relationships of the people around me? Where is this all headed, right? And what is a vision for the future we could be moving towards? And as you mentioned, it also can shift perspectives. It can create pictures, almost like mind maps of other people's perspectives, and really understand what's going on for other people. But it is a quiet function. It's quiet, and sometimes it's painfully slow, right?
Yeah.
It takes a while for those pictures to really manifest. Almost like you're working on something. You're working on something, and maybe you get a little bit of information over here that helps fill out the picture, and you get some information over here that helps fill out the picture. And then suddenly you see something very clearly and you're like, oh, well, that's what that is, right? I see it very clearly inside my mind's eye now. The challenge is that, as you mentioned, is that it is a little slow. And for people with ENFJ preferences, it requires a level of patience that they don't always naturally tune into. Now, the driver and the 3-year-old, I didn't mention the 3-year-old when I mentioned it, when I was talking about the driver before, but the driver is one half of what John Beebe calls the axis of relating to self. And the other side of that equation is the 3-year-old function, which we'll get to in a little bit, the thinking function. But the intuitive function, the co-pilot in this case for ENFJs, and the 10-year-old function, that creates what he calls the axis of relating to others. So people with ENFJ preferences instinctively use their intuition in behalf of other people. And this is part of why it's really tuned into culture a lot of times. There's this feeling that John says it has a parental energy associated with it. So it's almost like you want to parent with it. You want to help other people become better versions of themselves, help other people see a path for themselves, a vision for their future, to help other people understand their relationships and to shift perspectives so that they can resolve conflict in their own life by seeing, what's going on for others. And so it's very much associated with our relationship and how we tend to extend help to others, not just by getting their needs met with extroverted feeling, but also with this deep intuition, this vision for what is possible into and probable into the future.
So basically what you're saying is if an ENFJ is listening or watching right now and they're like, oh yeah, this part of me, I kind of understand this part of me, this perspective's part of me, I really feel like it's more toward other people than it is for myself. Mm-hmm. And that's true. It is really the axis of relating to other people. We might do this on behalf of others and not always turn it toward the self.
Yeah. One thing, it's a kind of a joke that I always tell her to ENJ types. I'm like, so if somebody comes up to you and goes, I just don't know where I'm headed. I just don't have a vision for my future. You probably have written up the schematics for them already. You're like, well, let's get going. You roll up your sleeves and then you've got this whole, within a 30-minute to 45-minute conversation, you have their entire future mapped out for them.
That's not a joke. That's pretty true for most ENJs.
Well, exactly. But when they try to do it for themselves, here's unfortunately the punchline. When they try to do it for themselves, there's a little less certainty around there. There's a little more I'm not sure what my future is supposed to look like. I'm not as certain as I am if somebody else came in and asked me. So it's like the function itself gets triggered by mentoring and helping others. So the reason why developing this skill is so crucial is in order to experience love from the self is that this is a big part of our contribution. This is how we see ourselves contributing to society. It's not just in the feeling function and interpersonal dynamics for ENFJs. It's no, I help the world see a vision for the future. I help the world understand each other. I help them see different perspectives of how, I help them realize that there's more here than just their own experience, that there's other people's experiences as well. And so becoming as skilled in this function as possible is important for an ENFJ's self-esteem because they see themselves contributing with it all the time. They watch themselves be better citizens effectively, right? Because we all want to be contributing to society. That feels good for everyone. And this is a big part of how somebody with ENFJ preferences does it. Now, if they are not as tapped in, right? If they're not building skill here, like you said, it's an easy one for them to skip because it is a little slower than they like to move oftentimes. It requires a lot more introspection and going inward. But if they find themselves struggling to develop skill here, they just rely on their talent, then their intuitions tend to be a little bit more vague, particularly when it comes to themselves. Because part of the parental energy and part of how they can build self-love is to not just contribute to society with this function, but also self-parent with it. Not say, if somebody asks me in 45 minutes, I have a schematic for their future, but also use it for the self and not just have vague inklings of the future, but really meditate. Where am I going? What is the path? What is my vision for myself? What are the ways that I can contribute on a bigger level, not just by sharing this gift, but by using this gift to see where I'm ultimately headed? Yeah.
The way I like to think about it, if I was talking to an ENFJ, which I am, if you're an ENFJ listening, it's like a seam of gold in like a gold mine. And wouldn't it be ridiculous in a gold mine to dig 5 or 10 feet in and go, oh, I got all the value out of this gold mine. What we're saying is a lot of ENFJs dig about 5 or 10 feet down to the gold of this perspectives process. They use it, they bring that out, they share it with others, and that's about it. They get to the surface, they don't go deep enough, but there's so much more gold down that vein in the gold mine, you can mine out. If you put proper focus on this, you have way more capacity than you're probably even exercising right now as an ENFJ. And the reason why that's important is, again, if you have a sense of more capacity and you're not going toward the skill that would increase your capacity here, our belief is you will erode self-trust, self-love, the ability for you to feel like you're in a good relationship with yourself. Because you're like, I'm not holding myself to the expectations I could be. I could be expecting myself to do so much more, and I'm not. Just like if you're in a relationship with another person, you're like, I could expect that person more from that person, and they're not performing to the expectations.
Yep, exactly. So you've got the unfocused visions that are part of this. There's also frustration around what they might believe are good ideas, but that get frustrated through like practical considerations.
Yeah.
There might be an over-reliance on quick hunches without really thinking them through and understanding why your intuition gave you that message, right? If it's just a quick hunch and you go with it, you might have missed a bigger picture.
Well, and you can imagine this is the case, right? Human dynamics shift faster than your perspective to keep up with. Mm-hmm. Like I go into my room and meditate, and the fight that was happening downstairs, and ENFJ might say that it's already been resolved and figured out because that's too slow to help contribute anything I've got to do right now. Mm-hmm. They might say.
Right, exactly. And so it might feel too slow and plodding, but it really is the key to like the grander design.
Deeper wisdom. About how people actually relate to each other.
That's right, exactly. And then there's also a tendency for idealization with some of this intuition, which can lead to disappointment if the full picture isn't seen.
Yeah.
So you might get an instinct, like we're talking about, somebody comes up and goes, I don't really have a picture for my future. And then you see all their potential. You see everything that could be manifesting in their future. And then they don't do it, right? And just like we're talking about, when we see somebody with a lot of potential and they don't manifest their potential, we can be deeply disappointed, especially if we painted a picture for them. Yeah. We gave them this vision. We shared it with them and they just kind of went, yeah, I guess I'm not going to do that. Or they went, great, thank you. But then they didn't actually do it. There can be a lot of disappointment associated with that. But getting deeper into the intuition, into that really deep wisdom, allows somebody with ENFJ preferences to see, well, maybe they need to do things sometimes the hard way, or maybe that isn't their path. Maybe that was one of their paths they could have taken, but another path is just as valuable. Or they can understand that not everybody deserves their intuition. That's another piece of it. When you get really into this function and understand how it can serve, then you're not just throwing little bits of intuition to anybody. You are understanding the gift it is.
Discretion.
Mm-hmm. And showing some discretion about who you'll share this gift with. Maybe even use it in a career path.
Yeah.
And so it's important for people with ENFJ preferences to hone this skill, to slow down, to learn some patience with it, to see a really bigger picture and a longer timeline, to not get frustrated when it doesn't manifest the way that they idealized, to understand that these visions take time to truly manifest, and that it's not really for them to give dictums to others, but to be able to mentor and to foster and guide and share wisdom, but not to force, not to require people to follow it because they're still their own person.
Yeah.
When they see themselves do this, when they see themselves fostering and mentoring and sharing wisdom with the right people and in the right context, and seeing a bigger picture, not just a quick hunch, but like a real long timeline, the feeling of contribution massively increases. And then when they use this on themselves and use all of the same wisdom on the self, then they feel like they're serving the self, right? It feels like a real honoring of who they are. And that removes an obstacle of not feeling that self-love.
Let's talk about that 10-year-old, or technically called the tertiary process. In the car model, it's right behind the co-pilot of perspectives. We've nicknamed it sensation. Extroverted sensing is the technical name. This is all about, 10-year-old, right? It doesn't mean that an ENFJ can't build capacity or skill here beyond the sophistication of a 10-year-old. It means that no matter what skill you build, no matter how many times you have to be here or in this part of yourself, you're always going to feel uncertain.
Right.
At about the level of a 10-year-old. So some 10-year-olds have skill, but they're always uncertain. I'm only 10. I don't know. I've never driven a car. I've never been married. I'm not old enough to do something like an adult, but I have some adult qualities now. what does this look like in my life? Like a 10-year-old might say in real life.
Yeah.
Well, the 10-year-old part of you as an ENFJ kind of feels the same way. Sometimes it feels really confident. It's having a great day and like, look how awesome I am. Other times it's like, am I doing this right? I don't know. And again, the skill doesn't matter. It's the uncertainty that's there.
Yeah. You're always looking to adults to let you know whether or not you're doing this thing right.
Yeah.
And so
what is this thing that we're doing right with sensation? What do we mean by that? I didn't get to that part.
So extroverted sensing or sensation is about it's about real life experience in the moment. It's like what am I experiencing right now?
Fast direct action.
Yeah, fast direct or just sometimes it's just being in the moment. Sometimes it's just like joie de vivre and just enjoying the moment for what it is. But it's very aware, right? It's very high awareness of what's going on around you. It's heightened awareness of the real. Right? What is the real experience I'm having? Unlike intuition, which is its other side, intuition is especially introverted intuition is about replicating reality inside your mind. So you can run a simulation into a future that doesn't exist yet, right? And so it's like you're kind of replicating reality inside of your intuition to be able to go, okay, so what is going to roll out? What is the most likely scenario into the future? Or what is going on for that other person? I mean, you can't directly access another person's thoughts, but you can kind of run a simulation of what is probably going on inside their brain and pattern that. Extroverted sensing or sensation is not doing that. It is just experiencing the real world around it from its own perspective.
So we could say in practice that the perspectives part of you as an ENFJ is trying to look at the person and get in their mindset. This sensation part is just looking at their body language. Like, how are they sitting? How are they standing? Do they have a smile? Or they have a smirk? What's the posture? What's the energy coming from them?
Right.
In the real moment.
Right.
I'm not trying to perspective and where they're coming from and the way they're attuned to they're thinking about something. I'm just tuned to what are they wearing? How are they showing up? How are they standing? How are they speaking to me in their tonality, all of those things.
Right. Well, and how am I dressed and how am I showing up
Absolutely.
and how are they experiencing me? Right.
This is the part of you that can maybe notice things like, labels in clothing, all the way to that body language of somebody else. And you often rely on this part of you to read people, especially if you don't have the time to slow down with that perspectives process. This part of you as an ENFJ goes, I know what's going on for them. I can see the body language from here. I know exactly what's going on with them. So it's a quick assessment process for you.
Right. But of course, all of these functions, all these mental processes do a whole host of things.
Sure. We're oversimplifying.
It is the part of you that does that, but it's also the part of you that enjoys nature and a good hike. It's the part of you that likes to just hang around with friends and laugh and have a good time.
Maybe overindulges sometimes.
That's right.
With libations.
It's the part of you that enjoys a good drink or maybe just a good meal.
Yeah.
It's the part of you that really loves to put your feet in the sand. And it's also the part of you that when it sees a need going unmet, gets into action quickly, right? Because it's an action taking function. So it notices and gets into action and it's going a direct line. It's also a very generative function. So it generates a lot of energy. And as a 10-year-old or tertiary function, the way that it can show up and why the expectations need to be set reasonably here is this can give a person with ENFJ preferences a feeling like they have endless energy, that they're the person who's always right there when a friend needs them, right? That they're always there to be a shoulder to cry on. That if you are a person in need, I will drop everything and be right there with you. And so unfortunately, because it has a little bit of uncertainty, it can overgive in order to have that impression of itself reflected back, which is, right, I'm always the friend that is there for you, right? So it feels almost like an obligation to drop everything and be there for everybody. And it can cause an ENFJ to overextend themselves, to be getting into action too quickly, to almost tirelessly, constantly be serving. And so that's one way that it can really kind of show up as something that will erode or, create an obstruction to feeling self-love. Because if an ENFJ is always busy serving other people, then the self gets neglected, right? And so you can't receive love from yourself because you're always occupied with what's going on for everybody else.
Or when you finally get to the place where it's finally me time, you overindulge. Mm-hmm. Or you do something unhealthy, or it's just a you block out one day out of like 6 months to go do a self-care day and that's it, right? It's like not enough. Like, 'cause it's not properly maintained over time. It shows up in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
So sometimes turning it back into yourself, it doesn't actually meet the need or show love. It just kind of like quickly tries to do something.
Yeah.
I think that could be frustrating.
Well, and if somebody with ENFJ preferences over relies on this part of them, right? They don't set a reasonable expectation that this is going to be an uncertain part, that this is a part that might be overdoing it a little bit, maybe showboating a little bit in order to get approval from others to go, okay, you're doing a good job here.
Yeah.
If they are handing too much power over to others to validate this part of who they are, not only will they overgive, but sometimes they won't take enough information into consideration before making snap judgments. This is a single perspective function, unlike their intuition, which it takes multiple perspectives into account. So sometimes they make too quick of an assessment of what's going on in relationships, or they might make too quick an assessment, like make a snap gut decision that actually isn't very reliable, but they're just reading the situation too quickly. And so they might take sides in an argument when really they should have been a more neutral party, right? The more they thought about it, the more their intuition got in there. They were like, actually, both people have something that they got to work on here, or whatever it is, right? They might put themselves in a situation where they're taking action much faster than their intuition can give them wisdom. And so if that happens, then they'll find themselves in a bunch of situations where they're like, maybe I got myself in over my head. This is the part that puts an ENFJ over their head, sometimes relationally, but also sometimes like physically, right? They take on too much. They're over exhausted. They might be working themselves too hard, or possibly they might be doing too much joie de vivre, right? They might be living a much more, sort of like physically ambitious life.
Overextended. Could we say that?
Yes. An overextended life in whatever way. And so that is an obstruction between them feeling love for themselves. If they find themselves they've put themselves in a dangerous context, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, if I loved myself, I wouldn't put myself in a dangerous context, which is not necessarily true because they still love themselves, but it might erode their ability to feel or receive that love going like, why did I do this? Right. Or they might now find themselves in the middle of drama. And they're like, why did I do this? Or they might be burnt out. Why did I do this? So making sure that you have reasonable expectations for this part of who you are prevents you from being in those situations where you're going, why did I do this to myself?
Yeah.
Right.
We will be right back. Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships, but what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves, and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality, and then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity, because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first, because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.
Now back to the show. So what does it look like? I mean, let's talk about ENFJ right now watching or listening. They tune into this part of themselves, this 10-year-old part. What is a proper expectation of our 10-year-old or tertiary for ENFJ specifically?
Yeah. So this is a part that truly does feel a sense of joie de vivre. So it is reasonable to actually, what's interesting is that extroverted sensing or sensation might be considered one of the most playful of all the functions. And it's in the playful 10-year-old position, right?
Yeah.
And so it almost doubles up on its playfulness. So having an expectation that this is where I go to play is a fabulous expectation. This is where I experience joie de vivre. This is where I experience good time with friends, right? This is where I'm a little spontaneous and adaptable. I'm not going to be so spontaneous that I take on, or I do something that leads me to the why did I do this to myself kind of, self-talk. But it is a part that goes like, yeah, why don't we go do that thing? That sounds fun, right? So a reasonable expectation is that, I'm going to use this to be adaptable. I'll use this to have a good time. But another reasonable expectation is I also have around John calls this an eternal child energy. We call it a 10-year-old function. So just like a child has a hard time saying no to the self, right? It's like if the package of cookies is there, the whole package is probably going to be eaten, right? The 10-year-old isn't going to like throttle its own desires and indulgences. So a reasonable expectation is I should probably make sure that I'm setting up situations and circumstances so that I can't overindulge. I probably need to have some parameters on myself, maybe some rules that I set in place to make it so that, or to keep this part of who I am, biting off more than it can chew, or doing things that are maybe unhealthy, like overindulgence with food or overindulgence with substances or alcohol or something to that effect. So just kind of know that this part of you is the part that like tends to be a little grabby when it comes to experiences, and that it might need other parts of you to put parameters on so that those parts don't run out of control.
Maybe an ENFJ right now doesn't identify with the idea of physical overindulgence or like substantive with eating too much or anything like that. But another avenue could possibly be over dramatizing everything. Like it could be like, well, this part of me enjoys the dynamics of a lot of drama, and it has high capacity for a lot of intense feelings and a lot of things happening out here that it doesn't always realize that it might be too much, or it might be overdoing that and causing harm to the self too. Like you don't need that much drama in this situation, but it's interesting. It's dynamic. It's got a lot of energy in it. So getting the proper balance of how much drama you allow to have in a situation, I think is part of this proper calibration here.
Or if I'm, hey, maybe let me know if I'm overextending myself with work. Maybe I'm working too hard.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm showing up a little too much and I don't have the space for that.
Sure.
So having some parameters in there. Now, it is a support though for the intuition. Intuition and sensing are two sides of the same coin. And this, again, is part of that axis of relating to others. So this part tends to show up in relationships with other people, which is why it looks around to see if it's doing it right? It's kind of tuned into other people's impression of it.
Less parental, more seeking approval.
Exactly. And it is a high energy function. So one of the best ways that an ENFJ can use this function to continue to experience, or to not have it be an obstruction to experiencing self-love, is to have it support the parental intuition. And so when intuition creates a vision for itself, it's got a plan for its life, it sort of understands where it's headed. It understands the impact it could be making to do good things for more than just, like maybe friends here and there, but actually might, to be able to turn this into something that really serves others. I know a lot of people with ENFJ preferences are very interested in coaching, or they're very interested in counseling. They can maybe interested in allyship with different activist causes, or whatever it is, right? Like whatever is the bigger vision. Use that extroverted sensing or sensation energy to help fuel it, right? To apply all of that energy into the bigger picture that serves other people, that is now not seeking approval from others, or like, am I doing this right? But more is tirelessly working in behalf of a vision for the self that includes others. Because an ENFJ is not going to set up a vision for their life that doesn't include helping other people out. They're just not going to do that. And so in that way, you've got two parts of you that are contributing to society in a bigger and bigger way, that really helps you feel that sense of self-esteem, that sense of like, hey, I'm doing good work here. I'm doing a good thing. Well, at the same time, not forgetting the importance of fun and play and keeping it light and doing all this stuff while having a good time. So we call these functions two sides of the same coin. So intuition is on one side and sensing is on the other side. And when
but the co-pilot and the 10-year-old have a relationship with each other. I'm just going to make sure we get this picture in our heads, that when we're seeing the co-pilot perspectives for ENFJs, by definition, the 10-year-old is face down on the table. We can't really see the 10-year-old. If we flip it and we see the 10-year-old showing up for an ENFJ of sensation, well, now perspectives is turned off. Mm-hmm. So this is a conundrum because you really need both parts of you to show up to the world.
Right, exactly.
So this is where you're headed with this.
Exactly. So when do you simultaneously see both sides of a coin? When it's spinning, right? Yeah. When it's being used in tandem with each other. So you can spin the coin, so to speak, and have the intuitive, introverted intuition and extroverted sensing. You can have them being work in tandem with each other so fast and so quickly that you almost can't tell what's heads and tails when the coin is spinning, right? You can't tell where they separate. And so this is called integrating the functions together. And Carl Jung called this a transcendent function. So when they're working in tandem with each other and integrated almost into one thing, they transcend their original limitations. And now suddenly intuition isn't limited by the fact that it is imaginative, right? That it's seeing a vision without its grounded sensory side. It's not limited by that because it's including that groundedness. It's not going to be frustrated by a vision that didn't manifest exactly how I pictured it. It's not going to be like disappointed by something that didn't roll out the way that it was in my head or how I wanted it to, some idealism, because it has that sensing side that keeps it grounded and realistic. And the sensing side isn't going to be limited by its single perspective or its inability to see a bigger picture or to learn valuable lessons. It's going to bring that intuition in. And so one of the best ways to continue to feel self-love or to remove that obstruction is to use these two functions in tandem with each other to do good work for everybody, including the self, but especially as a gift to give to the world. Yeah. And when somebody with ENFJ preferences does that, they usually find themselves to have very high self-esteem. They usually feel very good about the work they're doing.
Except... Dum, 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 dum. We're going to talk about the part that I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, that little inner critical voice that just chatters away in your head. You know what I'm talking about, ENFJ listening or watching right now. You know what I'm talking about. It's that part of you that's actually trying to calibrate. It's actually a good part of you. It's trying to bring a gift. It's actually trying to show you love. This part of yourself, deeply uncertain though, about the level of a 3-year-old. Introverted thinking is the technical name. We've nicknamed it accuracy. That's kind of what it wants. It wants to be accurate. It wants to have precision. The word that a lot of ENFJs might resonate with is perfection or perfectionism. This is where that part of you comes from. That everything's got to be perfect or I'll be judged by that. This is also a need for information, to know that I know what I'm talking about. If I'm going to teach, guide, lead, counsel, whatever I'm doing and showing up for people, I don't want to be a dumb idiot around it. I want to have smart, intelligent thoughts. But you're uncertain about that. So sometimes this can drive ENFJs to go and get credentials and proof in the outer world that, yeah, I know what I'm talking about because I got a piece of paper that says I studied this. Even though you have it all inside you, it really helps to have some of those markers in life to say, I am an expert here. I have credentials here. I've passed the test. I know what I'm talking about because of that uncertainty. Yeah. So this is the part of you that you know what I'm talking about. You have a relationship with it. And a little bit part of you is like, I kind of don't really like to look at this. I feel so uncertain here. I'll do the mitigation strategies, but when this thing shows up to me, it criticizes. I don't like it. I look at it, you might say as an ENFJ, as my enemy of self-love. It's the thing preventing me from loving myself. Because every time I look here, all it's telling me is everything that's wrong.
Yeah.
So how can we think about this? If an ENFJ is looking at this part of themselves and it's really hard to find self-love with this part of themselves, I think this part's trying to show love. But sometimes it can be hard to read that, especially when you're so uncertain, when it's this place in your personality.
Yeah. Yeah. Unlocking this is sort of the key to all of it. And the phrase I like to use, if the sensing function is uncertain and it's looking to others to give it a head pat and go, you did a good job in order to calm down. The challenge is that now we go back to the axis of relating to self.
Yeah.
And introverted thinking or accuracy is the polarity opposite of the feeling function of extroverted feeling or harmony. And so it's the other side of your greatest strength while simultaneously being about your relationship to yourself. And so other people can't approve of it for you. Nobody can tell you you're doing a good job in this and you'll believe them. And so it's not just a place of uncertainty, it's a place of deep uncertainty. and nobody can make you feel better about it. You've got to do it yourself. So the function itself,
meaning it doesn't matter how many degrees I have on my wall.
That's right.
If you're an ENFJ,
that's right.
how many times you've gone to class, how many doctorates you have, credentials, trainings, certifications, certified this and that. The uncertainty is never going away.
Exactly.
So make peace with it now, because it's
right.
never leaving no matter what you do.
Yeah. All of us have a little 3-year-old in our backseat that feels deeply uncertain, just like a 3-year-old would, right? A 3-year-old, if you're like, okay, 3-year-old, I've done as much as I can for you. It's your job now to take care of yourself.
Here's a credit card and the car keys. Go get some dinner.
That's right. Exactly.
What do I do? I don't know.
So it's just this, it's a deeply uncertain part of who we are.
Yeah.
And so for people who have ENFJ preferences, the deep uncertainty is related to a function that has a thirst for inconvenient truths. All right. That's really what that thinking function is trying to do. It's trying to get to the truth no matter what. It's trying to find things that are logically consistent, and not just the truth of the facts around here, but the truth of what makes sense to me, right? Like if I'm thinking about it, what lines up? It's the math of my mind. And so the challenge, and the reason why it's sort of the opposite of extroverted feeling or harmony, is that the deeper we go with how we're thinking, the more we reveal our thoughts to other people, the more likely we are to run into discord. We're going to run into, like, what makes sense to me isn't what makes sense to everybody else. And so if we start to communicate, well, this is kind of how I see it, you're inevitably going to run into things that the other person disagrees with, because no two minds are molded the same. And so it ends up feeling like, oh, we don't think alike. Does that mean that we're still in rapport with each other? Because we start revealing our truths to each other, the things we actually believe and things we're actually thinking. I mean, there are some families that are like, okay, at holidays, we're not allowed to talk about religion and we're not allowed to talk about politics. Well, religion and politics are the result of our logic trying to figure out how the world works, right? It's like my political positions are what I think are, what makes sense to me is the best way to govern. My religious beliefs are what makes sense to me about the nature of reality. So it's almost like we associate the truths of our mind, our subjective truths and the beliefs we have and the way that we think about the world. We almost make a one-to-one correlation with disagreements and arguments and fights and, hostile moments, at Thanksgiving. It's like fights break out around this kind of stuff. And so it is very easy to shove this part aside. And as you mentioned, it's also a deeply uncertain part about whether or not I have come to good logical conclusions.
Yeah.
Like if I disagree with everybody else, if I'm not in the consensus reality with everyone else, can I trust my own logic? Can I trust myself?
Yeah.
And since this function is always looking for things that are accurate and true no matter what, it ends up being a bit critical. It's like, if I could have done better, it's the part of you that goes, you could have done better. If I didn't do that great of a job in that argument, or if I didn't lay out my case very well, or if I didn't show up the way I could have shown up, or if a hair is out of place, this is the part of me that goes, yeah, you didn't show up as good as you could have. Yeah, your facts were not aligned, right? Like, yeah, no, you don't really actually know that much about that subject. No, your hair didn't look that good, right? It's like the part of you that's radically honest no matter how it makes you feel. And so as a deeply uncertain part of us that feels like it's meant to cause discord, it can feel like this inner mean voice that's just constantly criticizing.
Yeah. Which is deeply painful if you're of this type.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not fun to hear self-criticism at that level.
Yeah. And so it's an easy part for people with ENFJ preferences to shove aside. The challenge is that it can't actually be removed from your psyche.
Yeah.
It's an intrinsic part of your pre-wiring.
I mean, I think of it like a check engine light in your car. If there's like a signal, hey, there's something wrong with your engine, there's a truth you need to see about your engine, it would be silly to pull the light out and snip the wire and put the light back in. Okay, I don't see the check engine light anymore. Well, that engine's going to break down. You're going to have to pull over and address probably a bigger issue than you just taking the truth when you saw it first alerted. But what if you're not a mechanic? You don't know how to fix an engine. I don't know what to do. What do I do with a check engine light? It's easier for me to snip the wire and not have to see it than to address it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean the problem goes away.
Right, exactly. And it also doesn't mean you lack capacity. That's the interesting thing, is that when it comes to our 3-year-old function, sometimes we lack massive capacity. Like you said, I know ENFJs that are absolutely dripping in honors and certifications and diplomas, and they're total experts in their field. They know everything about their subject. Like it's actually this part of you that is uncertain about knowing enough.
Yeah.
Has frequently compelled people with ENFJ preferences to know a ton, right? Because they're like, do I know enough? Do I know enough? I'm not sure. I should probably learn more.
Yeah. So there's tons of capacity, you're saying.
So much capacity here, right? It's just the desire to tamp it down if it's now going to sound harsh or if it's going to create discord. So the most important thing that somebody with these preferences can do is to, like you said, make peace with uncertainty. Make peace with the fact that you're never going to feel certain in this function. It's always just going to kind of have this like, is it okay? Is it enough? Am I doing it right? That's a feature, not a bug. Okay. It's a part of us that I think on sort of a theoretical level, I don't know this to be true, but I think that having this voice, and for every personality type, it sounds a little different, but having this voice inside of us kind of keeps us honest. Right? It keeps us humble and modest. If we were only ever totally certain about everything we think and feel and our ways of entering the world, there'd be no throttle, right? There'd be no part of us that goes, hang tight now, maybe I should put a little bit more thought into it. There'd never be that moment. So we do need a part of ourselves to take a time out and think a little deeper. And interestingly enough, this is introverted thinking. This is that function that does force somebody to pause and go, wait, does this actually make sense to me? Right? Am I taking in enough information or data around this? If I actually analyzed this, and I don't mean like think about it a little bit, I mean like to put some real, true, unbiased analysis into this. If a person with these preferences is able to get through the uncertainty they feel and just make peace with that, make it part of their, like extend their comfort zone to include uncertainty, there are a ton of gifts this function can give. And that includes a measure for self-improvement. It includes an ability to be honest with ourselves, be honest with other people, be willing to deal with discord, be willing to deal with fights. This is the part that helps that feeling function, that extroverted feeling or harmony function, become a better diplomat because it can hang with conflict. It can hang with people not getting along or not thinking the same thoughts. It can sort of hang with the idea that everybody has a different take on reality. And if everybody is saying that they are in total lockstep with each other around everything, they're lying.
Yeah.
Right. There is a value towards autonomy of thought in this function. And that includes the autonomy of my thought. So being able to break from consensus, being able to break from what society says, really think it through for the self and go, I think I actually disagree on this and this and this. You know, like I'm a part of this political party, but I don't agree with everything. I actually disagree with these points. Or, you know, like I was raised this kind of religion, but I've really put a lot of thought into it. And this is sort of my take on it, right?
Yeah.
This is how I think about it. And giving the ENFJ, giving oneself permission to think their own thoughts, to not have to be in lockstep with everybody else, to not have to always be in agreement, to be able to present a thought that disagrees without pushing it too hard, right? And getting barky about it because of that uncertainty, but being able to go like, you know what? I don't actually know for sure, but I kind of think it works this way.
And I think it goes over to the other idea we talked about at the beginning too, setting boundaries with harmony. Your driver as an ENFJ gives you discretion on where you start and stop and what is your truth. And then on the other side of that, what is your truth? ? Accuracy, your personal truth and beliefs. You're uncertain about it, but good boundary setting again. What are my truths and what are somebody else's truths? So it's not just people's energy that can cross your boundaries. You might have thoughts and beliefs that were pushed through your boundaries that you believe that you don't really believe. Mm-hmm. You think you believe them. You don't know where your thoughts and where somebody else's thoughts start and stop. And so getting discretion here, integrating this with your extroverted feeling, allowing your harmony to help set the boundaries properly, also will allow you access here to integrate this because you're, again, uncertainty, you're not going to be really great at this part of yourself. None of us are good at our 3-year-olds. It's just, I have one that's not this process, it's a different one. I'm not good at it. It's really hard for me. some capacity there, but I'm always uncertain.
Well, in what I've noticed with the 3-year-old function is in some areas we might be actually super good at it.
Sure.
But then there's a bunch of stuff we're not, right?
Inconsistently good.
It's inconsistently
I think
good.
that's fair to make that
exactly
comment.
Exactly.
Because you as an ENFJ listening might be like, no, I'm really an expert in this. And you're right. You are.
Yeah. It's just it's something that doesn't get a lot of our attention as a general rule. So what we do tend to build in it is inconsistent, and it changes from ENFJ to ENFJ. How they're good at their introverted thinking or accuracy is going to alter depending upon what took their fancy. Right? Some ENFJs are really good at being radically honest. They will tell you exactly what they're thinking. They're very good at radical honesty. Others are terrible at being honest, but they're really good at certain logic puzzles, like really logicking things out and really kind of understanding a bit, like exactly what's going on there. They might be fantastic at math or philosophy or advanced, like logic consistency, but they have a hard time being honest, right? Or saying it. Some ENFJs are experts in their field. Like they know absolutely every piece of information about a certain topic, but they have a really hard time going against maybe other people in their field, right? When they know that they're right about something and the rest of the field is wrong, being willing to communicate that might be very difficult for them because they don't want to go against the consensus. Yeah. So almost every ENFJ is good at something in this. It's just whether or not they feel permission, enough certainty to assert it is the tough thing.
Yeah. There's a part of my personality that's worried about time and making sure we can continue in a good time. So we're not up at the 2-hour mark soon. So let me say this. Is there anything else you want to say about the ENFJ? Because I also want to talk a little bit before we land the plane. It's going to take a few minutes here about what all the rest of us can learn from ENFJ self-love. Before I want to do that, I want to make sure that we wrap this up completely.
Thank you. All right. So you've got, just like the co-pilot and the 10-year-old can become a coin that spins, it's the same thing for the driver and the 3-year-old. You can take your feeling function, extroverted feeling or harmony, and your thinking function, introverted thinking or accuracy, and you can integrate them into each other. And this, again, this is the ability to hang with conflict in order to create true harmony and resolution. This is the part of you that serves other people, not just not with the sense that you know best, but with an understanding and awareness that everybody has a right to autonomy. And so when you are helping people out, you're doing so with more discretion. This is the part when those two functions are working in tandem with each other. This is an ability to see one's weaknesses without necessarily jumping to self-flagellation, right? To the inner, mean voice. Because extroverted feeling or harmony is fantastic at compassion and empathy. So it creates self-empathy. It's an ability to see one's own weaknesses, to see one's own mistakes, but instead of becoming demoralized by them and believing that you're a terrible person for it, realizing that those are opportunities for growth and development. Recognizing everybody makes mistakes. Extroverted feeling or harmony is looking at the social landscape and it sees how people make mistakes in order to learn and grow. But then when I make a mistake, well, suddenly that's unacceptable. So if you bring this voice and see it less of a critic and more of an auditor, right? This is a voice of auditing. It's just trying to find the truth. It's just trying to find what's accurate. And then bringing that up into a place that is naturally compassionate, sort of understands how humans work, understands how interpersonal dynamics happen. You bring those two things together and you spin that coin and suddenly you can do an audit of both yourself and other people and still hold compassion, still hold love, recognize that we're just humans humaning, right? Yeah. Those two things make it so that the inner mean voice is no longer a mean voice. It's a helpful voice to look for areas that could be improved if that's what you can do right now. Because extroverted feeling or harmony also recognizes that there are limitations to what people can do. So sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm weak there. Right? I have a weakness there. It doesn't mean I'm a terrible person. Yeah, I'm not always certain of my information, or I'm not always certain if I'm doing this thing right. But it's okay because, we're all imperfect and we all have our struggles. And right now I might not have the energy to focus on it. Or maybe I do. And maybe that's an opportunity for me to grow. So it's about transcending the criticism into a compassionate awareness of opportunities for growth.
Yeah. We'll probably touch on some of those themes as well when we talk about what the rest of us can learn from an ENFJ. So let's talk about what we can learn, the rest of us, the other 15 types, can learn from an ENFJ's framework of self-love. So again, just to review, we're tuning into the personality types of all 16 types, looking at that as an axis of self-love. And we use the framework of, if you were in a relationship with somebody, you would give love freely without condition, but the relationship dynamic does have conditions. So love doesn't have conditions, but the relationship between you and another person and other people has conditions to it. That's what a relationship is. It has unspoken and spoken contracts between people. It can go all the way up to like a formal contract, like marriage, or just a unspoken, like, hey, we're friends, we're hanging out, right? And we don't really talk about it, but it's understood between us. So that's how relationships work. And the same thing with ourselves. We have a relationship with ourselves, and we're attempting all the time. The premise is to send love to ourselves. There's obstructions in the way. And we believe that proper expectations can help us understand what's the right relationship with ourselves based on our personality, so we can then freely give ourselves love. Now, we also believe that love is a verb. It has action with it. It's not something I say. I can say I love you all day long, but unless I show it with actions, you're not going to probably believe me, Antonia, right? I think this is how it works in relationships. So loving ourselves requires action. It's not just enough to say, I love myself, and wear like a nice bling t-shirt that, you know, how awesome I am, to reinforce self-talk. Those can be great, but self-talk isn't enough. It requires us to just like in a real relationship, talk isn't enough. Talk is cheap. It requires us to demonstrate the love. Mm-hmm. It's a verb. It requires us to show action. So we also have that frame. Yeah. So as we tune into the ENFJ and we're talking about how they can love themselves, what's the principle that the rest of us can draw from this?
Well, first I want to do a really quick recap, because I'm so glad you said that. So just as a recap, here are the expectations. The expectations is that your driver function, have high expectations for it. Push it harder.
It's for everybody, not just ENFJs.
Exactly.
It's a framework.
But for ENFJs, their extroverted feeling of harmony, don't let yourself get away with being likable. Don't allow yourself to just get away with seeing people's needs and meeting them. Build good boundaries, become diplomatic, understand that there is a bigger picture going on. Recognize that you have more inside of yourself here, particularly leadership opportunities, and don't let yourself off the hook. Otherwise, your inner wisdom will be disappointed. For your intuition, your perspectives, your introverted intuition function, your co-pilots have high expectations of how you're going to both serve others and yourself. This is a major part of you, how you contribute to the world. So set higher expectations of service through this, and make sure that you're putting yourself in that equation, that you're not just creating an intuitive vision for others, but also for the self. When you get to the 10-year-old function, extroverted sensing or sensation, you need to have more reasonable expectations. You don't have limitless energy. You don't pick up everything. You don't see everything. You can't always control other people's impressions of you, and you don't always have the right impression of other people on first glance. So recognize that you need to have more reasonable expectations here, that sometimes you can be a bit overindulgent. Sometimes you can bite off more than you can chew. Sometimes you don't have limitless energy like you were hoping. But if you use it in behalf of your intuition, now you have a powerhouse of two functions that can really serve the world in a beautiful way and give yourself a ton of a sense of contribution that comes with also a lot of fun. And by the time you get to that thinking function, the 3-year-old, introverted thinking or accuracy, you really need to set your expectations accordingly. Like, this is a part of you that if you think that you're supposed to outclass everybody else in this function, like you're supposed to show up in this incredible way, you're going to demoralize yourself. You just have a preference for social harmony over radical honesty. You just do. But that doesn't mean you can't also be honest. It doesn't mean that you can't show up in an analytic way. It doesn't mean that you don't have logic. It just means that if you set too high of expectations for yourself here, you're going to end up criticizing yourself constantly, and it's going to feel very demoralizing. So set reasonable expectations and use it as a support structure and in behalf of your feeling function of harmony, of extroverted feeling. And when those two functions are being used in tandem, then you can have a lot of self-compassion while you're also being honest with yourself.
Well, and I think that audit, that 3-year-old part of you as an ENFJ, when you do the audit, it does it disembodied if it's doing it well.
Yes.
You can just look at your life as it is. And I think the thing that would surprise a lot of people about ENFJs is because they're usually the bombastic, energetic, I don't know if I would say life of the party, but usually they're where the party is. I mean, if there's human engagement in an extroverted way, the ENFJ can often find themselves in that dynamic, right? And that's the obvious thing that we all can see. I think the non-obvious thing about ENFJs is they have a little bit of a loner, go away from everybody, off by themselves. And we don't see that because they genuinely go off by themselves.
Right.
And we don't see them they're not sitting in the corner necessarily. That would be unacceptable because I'm supposed to be with the group right now. So if you see them in any social environment, they're probably participating in most cases if they're feeling okay. But when they're not in a social environment, the secret about a lot of ENFJs is they sneak away and they spend some alone time in a lot of quiet reflection with the self.
Yeah.
This is where those inner voices, both the perspectives part of them, that's the superpower, but that little inner critic or calibrator can come up. Integrating it, though, means that when an ENFJ goes to those quiet places and is ruminating with their intuition, that part of themselves, that's the calibrator part, is not showing up as a critic as much. It's showing up to contribute and add calibration in those quiet, reflective moments. There's always some uncertainty there, and sometimes criticism can sneak in. But usually a mature, healthy ENFJ that's done a lot of work to integrate these parts of themselves benefits greatly from that quiet. They benefit greatly from that audit.
Yes.
And I think that's something we can learn from them around self-love.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. When an ENFJ has figured out how to both give themselves love and receive love for themselves, that's exactly what's going on. And that introspective analysis, that what you could call compassionate self-inquiry, is oftentimes the source for wisdom when they're counseling others.
Yeah.
When you are hearing these pearls of wisdom come from them, this ability to like spin a narrative so that you understand the point, so you can really get what they're saying. It's usually because they have become somebody who does exactly what you're talking about. They quietly self-reflect and understand a bigger picture, understand the truth behind things. And that comes up in their mentorship and their counsel. And it's actually quite inspiring. It's not like they just came up with all that stuff immediately. They've been thinking about it. They've been brewing on it. And so I think that can be quite inspiring to others to hear the results of that compassionate self-reflection.
Yeah. So I think that's something we can all learn from the ENFJ personality type. And if you're an ENFJ listening right now, we've talked about this idea of self-love. Is it easy to love yourself? Is it hard to love yourself? Have you gotten some more insight into, oh, wow, those 4 parts of me? That's really cool that I can expect more from the 2 parts of me that are in the front seat. And I can have proper expectations for the 2 parts of me, maybe that are a little less certain, that I don't have as much access or capacity or certainty around. Even though I might have a ton of skill or I have to go there for my job or something, it's interesting to see how those are in place. What do you think? What's coming up for you from your ENFJ perspective? Or if you have an ENFJ in your life and you want to share as well, come over to personalityhacker.com directly below this episode. You can leave a comment, ask a question. More importantly, I say this every episode that in this conversation with you, you haven't had a microphone. We want to hear from you. Tell us your story. A story is a compressed experience. Maybe you want to share a story about you finding self-love in your life or your struggle with self-love. Maybe we could address it on future podcasts or other content we're going to create. We want to calibrate this with you. We want to curate this with you. Come over and make your voice heard.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and other Android platforms. If you leave a rating and a review for us on iTunes, I promise you I'll read it. I read every one.
It's like fuel for your soul.
It is fuel to continue
Seriously,
doing
when
the
Antonia
podcast.
sees a new, not just a rating like the stars, but on iTunes or Goodreads for our book or something like that, she reads it and it's like, oh, okay, people are hearing what we're saying. Because, you record these, you send them out to the internet.
Yeah.
And those reviews really help Antonia specifically, whether people are hearing them and what they're thinking about them. And I think it fuels your energy.
Yeah. I don't know why, but the data of like how many downloads we have, I'm like, yeah, but those could have just been downloaded to a phone and nobody listened to them.
It's the qualitative comment.
That's right. Somebody leaves a review. I'm like, oh, somebody's actually listening. That's fabulous. So yeah, if you leave a rating and review, I would be personally grateful. And like you said, you can also leave a review on Goodreads for our book, because we do have a book and it is available at all major book retailers. Pick up a copy of the Owner's Manual. I highly recommend it. They've been a labor of love for years. We are always adding more to them. If you have ENFJ preferences and you want to do a deep dive into your personality type and really understand all the stuff we're talking about, including some other phenomena, as you mentioned before, Joel, there's a phenomena called loops, when your driver and your 10-year-old get in cahoots with each other and completely bypass the co-pilot, which is bad news. There's grips, which is when your 3-year-old function grips the steering wheel of the car, so to speak, and you get a lot of that inner mean talk. And then we also talk about fixations your personality type has, how to find a flow state, all sorts of goodies. So head over to personalityhacker.com and grab an owner's manual. And even if you don't have ENFJ preferences, grab the owner's manual that is right for your personality type.
Yeah. I mean, we got a lot of topics we talk about, tons of courses and programs and products for you, but we really do two primary things. We help you find your personality blueprint. And when you know what your personality blueprint is, get on your life path. I mean, I simplified down to those 2 levers. And so the owner's manual is going to help you figure out that blueprint and really find accesses to grow yourself so you can get on the life path, your passion, purpose, and mission in this life. Yep. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.
Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships. But what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves, and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality. And then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity. Because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first. Because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.